Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on monetization of oil and gas fields. I am Biswanath Ghosh, Director at Cairn Oil Gas Vedanta Limited, and I'll be the session chair for today afternoon. Firstly, I should thank the organizers and the ministry for inviting me here and giving me this opportunity to be a part of the technical committee and also be a session chair for this session. Monetization of oil and gas fields is very important, especially in India's energy context. India needs a lot of energy, and as you all know, we are still heavily dependent on imports of hydrocarbons for our need and our energy demands. And this is likely to stay in the energy mix for quite some time. Often we see around the globe that hydrocarbons are being found, and it takes time to monetize it, whether it is from the new fields or even to keep the life cycle and the lifespan of the fields going. And the key challenges, we see it in multi-folds, whether it is technical, whether it is operational, or it's fiscal, or it requires investments decisions as well. Key challenges which the monetization of oil and gas fields mainly see in the space around the subsurface is because of the complexity. Either reservoirs are tight, or the geology is complex, or it's segmented or baffled. Or sometimes, because of this heterogeneity or because of other complexities, the EOR techniques to get on with a mature field which is depleting and the pressures are declining is very difficult to maintain. Investors often find it challenging if they do not have enough information to continue to invest in a field or a new resource which has been found. So the fiscal regime, the entire investment life cycle is also very important. Insufficient data with data gaps adds to the uncertainties as well. So today, we have the eminent speakers. We're going to talk through what are the different ways we can address these challenges, whether it is technology, technical elements, workflows, or innovative way to do collaborative efforts and partnerships, both in terms of techniques and technology, but also in terms of how we share capital and have a good fiscal collaboration to get some of these fields going and monetizing them for the need of the country and world at large. So we have 4 speakers today. First of all, let's begin with Chandan. Chandan Nirvikar is a Chief Technology Manager at BP. He has over 2 decades of experience in production, refining, and trading. And he's also a hands-on technologist with extensive experience in integration architecture and enterprise solutions. So over to Chandan, and Chandan will speak on sand management using advanced analytics. Chandan, the stage is yours.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Chandan. Welcome to IEW, first of all. Appreciate you spending time with us here. So I've been with BP for a while, and I am the Chief Technology Manager. We, in the BP business, as we produce oil and gas, we come across a challenge with the sanding event. So I'm going to talk about that a little. Now, how we have addressed this solution, building some of the technology foundations that we have with a good amount of data and applying some analytics technologies to be able to identify sanding events which are happening in the production system and to be able to mitigate that. So let's first understand what are those sanding events and what's the issue that it causes. So sanding events, when there is sand flowing through with a high velocity with high energy, it causes erosion in the equipments, which could lead to unplanned maintenance downtimes. It could also lead to reduction in the lifespan of the equipment itself. Also, often sand could cause flow issues. It could cause blockages, which would then lead to, again, downtime in the production as well. And because of this repeated maintenance required, your maintenance costs go up as well, which is, again, not profitable for the business. And also, this could lead to certain safety-related incidents as well. If there is a leak, there could be an impact on the production onto the environment as well. So it's quite important to be able to identify any of certain issues happening, and be able to mitigate that. And of course, overall, economically as well, it is beneficial for the business to be able to trap such events. So what we have built is a solution which looks at the data which is coming in. So we primarily use acoustic sensors which are strapped onto your flow lines, and we gather this data and we run some analytics. Now, while these acoustic sensors, they already have some analytics built into it to be able to spot sanding events. However, we have built a solution on top. Now, some of you who have come across with the acoustic sensors would probably know that the data is sometimes unreliable. So what we do, first of all, once we collect this data in our cloud environment, we try to identify any data anomalies. So we look at any of the missing data sets, because they could be oftentimes where some of the data points are missing, or sometimes the data could be erroneous. It could be having incorrect value. So we apply different mechanism again. So if there is data which is missing, and if it's a small gap in the data, as you can see in the plot on the right hand side, you will see the two red spikes, which is highlighting the gap in the data. So using the analytics mechanism, we can identify if any of the data points are missing, and we will be able to do a forward fill, or we can also do an average. So again, we deploy different technologies to fill the gap in the data set. Also, we also look at the quality of data in terms of any data which is not meaningful. If there are not a numeric number, so we also identify that, which is shown by the blue bar at the bottom on the right hand side. And then we also we address the data by applying similar technologies as I mentioned previously. So it's really important to take good quality data, set that benchmark for the data quality to go into analysis. Now, once we have good quality data, we need to we identify. We kind of normalize the data to be able to identify the sanding events, because there could be a variety of data points. There could be some spikes in the data, so we need to normalize it. Now, what we do here is we use a technique to be able to normalize, which is not just a normal mean. We use an exponential weighted mean to be able to identify the data which is more relevant to the near past than something which is further away in the past. So what we do is we use a time window to be able to give more weightage to the time events which have happened in the recent past than the ones before. So that way it's relevant to what's happening in the field at that point in time, and that's where your insights are more relevant to the current time. So by doing that, we identify, as you can see in the plot, some of those red data points which are kind of spiking, and then we can ignore that, and then we build a weighted average of the sanding events. Now, once we have done that, we need to get into identifying sanding events which might be happening. Now, your petroleum engineers who are on the case, they will be analyzing this data on a manual basis. But then by using the advanced technology, we are able to identify patterns which are very similar to sand event happening. So we work with our petroleum engineers to be able to identify what kind of a signature depicts a sanding event. And there's a very specific pattern that we came across. So as you can see in the chart, the very first spike shows a very high energy event happening in a very short span of time, and then there is a gradual decrease of the energy. So that's what a typical sanding event looks like. While the other ones have a different pattern. As you can see, there is a bit of a uptake, and then there is a bit of a ramp down, or maybe a very sharp increase and then followed by a very sharp decrease as well. So by using advanced analytics, we are able to do the differentials on the acoustic sensing data, and then be able to drive that pattern and make sure only the sensing events, the data which is mimicking or replicating or like closely aligned with the sanding event, we only select that for further investigation. Other things, we can ignore that. Right, so once we have done that, we have identified some sanding events. What we often notice is, because of the nature of the acoustic sensors, when they are strapped onto to flow lines, there could be external activity. There could be water splashing, there could be rain, there could be ROVs as well going in the field, because of which there could be spike in the noise signal. Now, to be able to identify that, what we do, we look at the nearby wells. So we look at acoustic data coming from the nearby wells, and then we overlay it to be able to see if there are spikes which are at the same point in time of the same pattern, to be able to find the common model rejection, to be able to eliminate those events, because that very highly likely that they are being induced by external events and not actually happening within the production system. So we use that common model rejection to be able to eliminate such events. There is also another correlation that we found is to do with the choke events. So often when the choke is being moved, there is a highly likelihood that we will have sand coming through, and that could be because of the increased flow rate as well. So we have built a choke correlation model as well. So we look at the flow rate, the position of the choke, and then to be able to identify what kind of acoustic data is that we are receiving, and then be able to eliminate those elements, those sensor signals which are relevant to choke movement, because they are not really, that's kind of is the nature of the choke being moved. So we identify such patterns, and then we eliminate that as well, so that we don't have to spend time on that. Now, doing all of that, we essentially kind of come up with a really good quality data, which is allowing you to pinpoint sanding events which are happening, and then our engineers could go in and then take the corrective actions. So it takes a lot of time away from doing manual analysis, and then be able to proactively take actions to correct that. So which has been quite helpful. Now, how we have achieved this? So this is the solution which we are using right now, and BP is a cloud-only company, so anything and everything that we build is deployed in cloud. So what we do is we take data from our sensors in the field, and in real time, the data is pushed onto the cloud, and we use Azure Cloud. And then applying the techniques which I just described to you, we draw these insights, and then we display these insights to our petroleum engineers, to our users on a tool called Palantir. So we use Palantir Foundry as a dashboard, as an analytics platform, where these insights are available for our engineers to view. So it's been a game changer, because sanding events are something which are really crucial, and something really something which kind of impacts the production system, and that's where we have been able to trap some of these events by applying these advanced analytic techniques. Right, so how we did this, we operate, so BP as a company, we operate in a global setup. We have a GCC in Pune, and we work with our experts who are based in different parts of the world and also in Pune. We work with them, so we involve our petroleum engineers, other engineers, and also our digital specialists as well. So we involve our data engineers and data scientists to be able to come together, be able to identify the challenges that we are facing in the business, and to be able to come up with a solution which is then handed over to our customers. So we apply kind of the data engineers, data scientists, and the petroleum engineers working together under one technology leadership, and the strategic platform that we have, like cloud and Palantir that I mentioned. We are able to build this solution, be able to operate it. I think that's pretty much it. Thank you very much. So I will leave with that, and back to you. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chandan. Chandan very well pointed out how early detection and interventions in sand management is important, and how the acoustic sensors, especially the acoustic sand detections and signal processing, augments augments the field life and the field monetizations, especially when you do it rightly in an integrated manner. I'll invite the next speaker now on the stage, Ayush Kumar. Ayush Kumar is a young geophysicist in IndianOil Corporation, and Ayush is going to talk on investigating automatic fault detections using supervised machine learning. And let's hear Ayush, what he has to talk about and how he wants to decipher the subsurface and enable the field lives. Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. Very good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Ayush Kumar. I am from IndianOil Corporation Limited, and today I am here to speak on a work on investigating automatic fault detection using unsupervised machine learning. So this work has been done by me and my team members, which comprises of Rakesh Roshan Rana, Himanshu Bharti, Shruti Datta, and Rupayan Chen. So this is the outline for the presentation. We'll talk about the study objective, background, and we'll set up the background of this study. Then we'll go into the supervised and unsupervised learning. Then we'll go through the workflow which I have followed, where I have worked on the Python script from top to bottom. Then we'll see the complex trace analysis, the mathematics fundamental that I have used in this workflow. Then we'll see at the result and we'll conclude our work. So the study objective and background, as we know, the fault detection is a crucial step in seismic interpretation. So in this attempt, we are attempting to automate the fault detection using unsupervised learning. So we are particularly working with the unsupervised learning here. For this unsupervised learning, we have tried to attempt 3 different algorithms, which are K-mean clustering, restrictive Boltzmann machine, and self-organization map that we'll see in detail. So for this work, I have used 2 different data sets. One is from Assam Basin, Northeast India, and other is taken from Browse Basin, that is from Australia. So we have done a multiple pre-processing and processing steps, which will tell us how fault detection has been identified in the seismic data. So before heading ahead, let's go into the supervised and unsupervised learning, that as this is the basic fundamental of our study. As you can see in supervised learning, it is a learning where we are assigning our machine with the labeled data set, and we are telling the machine, see, these are the, but for example, here you can see we are telling the machine like these particular structures like rectangle, circle, for example here, these are the labeled data set, and you have to find these data set among the testing. So this is how supervised learning works. But here in our presentation, we will work with unsupervised learning, where what we do is we import the input data set to a machine, where the machine in itself find a way to cluster to identify different features which are having a same nature into different clusters. That is what we are trying to attempt here. So for example, here I have shown for say different IDs 1, 2, 3 for n IDs. There are different attribute 1, 2, and n number of times. So these are different input data we are fed into the machine, and what we are trying to get it. For example, from the black box, like these input will go to the black box, and what we are getting in the end is cluster units. So for each IDs, we are at the end we are getting a cluster ID. Here you can show here you can see these cluster IDs as cluster number 3, cluster number 2, cluster number 6. So my different attributes are now dissociated into different clusters. So this is what we are trying to do. Yeah, so let's start with our first algorithm, which is self-organization map. So self-organization map, what it does it, we are providing different inputs. Demonstration has been showing. For example, there are 6 features are provided in black circle. So what we want to do with these 6 input is, we want these 6 input to be divided into different clusters. For example, here 2 neurons are selected. So we want these different input to be dissociated into 2 number of clusters. What cluster these are going to be? So what happens? First, my input will be selected on a random basis. For example, the blue color you can see. So my neurons will find the Euclidean distance, which is the minimum Euclidean distance from the features. So it will try to adapt into a cluster. Like we will go one by one, and we will identify which feature can be associated with which cluster. So for example, we are going from each input from upper section to lower section, and that's how neurons are going to dissociate themselves into different clusters. At the end, what we are going to have is, we are going to have 2 different clusters. One you can see in the upper section and one in the lower section. That's how our 6 input features are now dissociated into 2 different clusters. So this is how SOM will work. Our next algorithm which we are working on is K-mean clustering. K-mean clustering is the simplest way of dissociate data into different clusters, where the input data will in itself find a centroid, and each centroid will calculate the distance from the other input data, and that's how it will after repeated iteration, my whole data set will be converted into some sets of clusters. As you can see in the animation below, these number of data sets will dissociate themselves into 3 clusters, which are being represented by blue, green, and yellow circles. And last algorithm which we'll talk about is restricted Boltzmann machine. Restricted Boltzmann machine is a type of artificial neural network which works on a classical mechanics problem where we define the probability of any system to be in is directly proportional to temperature. On the term of temperature, we can define what is the current probability of that system. So in analogous to that concept, in machine learning, what we are doing is we are telling for any system to be the probability of finding any particle into one cluster is directly dependent on the visual nodes and hidden nodes, which is shown here in the function E of V of H. So this is how we will going with the 3 algorithms. So the workflow, we are using the Python script. We have using the Python libraries, namely Minisom, NumPy, and others. So firstly, we will import the 3D seismic volume. We'll extract our 2D seismic section from it. We'll compute different seismic attributes. We'll do the processing steps, namely noise filtration. We'll normalize the data for our time saving mechanism. Then we'll apply our 3 algorithms and see what clusters are they giving to it, and these particular clusters, how they are going to help in the geological interpretation. The data set which I was saying is taken from 2 different geological settings. One is taken from Assam Basin from Northeast India, which is a compressional regime clastic lithology, and other is taken from Australia Basin, which is open source data. So in this particular example, you can see on the left side, we have a 2D seismic section extracted from the 3D volume. So in this seismic section, we have started pre-processing from right here. In this 2D seismic section, you can see there are many null values in top and bottom. So we have to remove those so that our model will not get biased from the null value in itself. Otherwise, it can also cluster the null values into one cluster, which will be of no use. So yeah, in that process, we have deduct the null values. And now since seismic section is my input, but we need to derive some attribute to force our algorithm to work on identifying the similar features. So for that, I have used seismic attribute, which has been calculated from complex trace analysis, which is simply the real function plus imaginary number times of Hilbert transform. And using this mathematical function, we have derived various seismic attributes, namely physical and geometric attributes. Physical attributes define more about the lithology's features, while geometric attributes defines more about the geometry of seismic section, say discontinuity is present in it. So on the left side, these are the namely 15 seismic attributes which we have calculated using those complex trace analysis. And on the right side, we have processed those inputs using Kohara filter. Kohara filter is a smoothing function with smoothing our seismic section, remove the random noises right over there, but also preserve the edge enhancement, like edges and discontinuities are preserved over here. These are all the part of pre-processing. Since our 2D section is since our seismic section is of 2D in nature, so we need to convert this 2D into 1D array in this particular fashion. And then we have normalized the data for removing the absolute number ambiguity, because absolute number can ranges from very small to very high. So have convert this into a 0 to 1 scale. Here we have calculated those seismic attributes. We need to use only particular seismic attributes which are going to contribute in our analysis, because a few seismic attributes are those which are correlated in nature and may be giving a bias. So we need to remove those. So here in the strongly correlated colors attributes, we can take any one of them. So we have, after this, we have also reduced the dimension using the PCA, principal component analysis. So for this, we have used the 80% of variance ratio, where three PCAs will be used in our algorithms. So here, these are the results for SOM, for self-organization map. In the left, we have Assam Basin result, and in the right, we have Australia Basin result. So in the left, we can see I have used 4 different cluster units, 4x4, 8x8, 16x16, 64x16.4. So each color here shows a different feature, which might be of our use or which might not be of our use. So This is what unsupervised learning do. They dissociate our amplitude into different clusters. Now it's our job to identify them, which geological feature they are referring to. Next would be RVM, restricted Boltzmann machine. Here also the clusters has been made, but you can see as compared to SOM, the RVM is more of a physical attribute combination, but not discontinuity prevailing. And the last we have used K-mean clustering. Here also we have dissociated our seismic signal into different clusters. So now what we are getting from it, we have to discuss this. So see, in the upper section, I have shown SOM and RVM, where I can say in SOM for say cluster number 2, 3, and 7 are correlating the discontinuous features. So that's why I have extracted the cluster number 2, 3, 7 over from the entire seismic clusters, which I feel, which I interpret it to be as discontinuity enhancer. So that's how I can extract the whole clusters from the whole 3D cubes, which associated from the which associates discontinuity. So that's how I can make the fault network from the entire 3D section. So we have also observed, like in RVM and K-mean, those are not directly helping in identifying the discontinuities, but those are very good indicator in lithofacies identification. See, if we have well log data here, then we can directly correlate the sweet spots from the well log and identify those lithofacies from the seismic features, so that we can have the sweet spots, or we can extract the geobodies from the seismic data in itself. So what we have done is we have the sole input is seismic data here. We haven't used any label data set. We haven't used any other information. Only seismic data is there. That's what unsupervised learning is doing here. So in conclusion, what we have realized is the algorithms are very sensitive towards the input. That in our case, inputs were seismic attributes. So selecting particular seismic attributes is very important for what we are aiming for. So we have used three algorithms in which SOM works fine with discontinuity identification, and other RVM and K-mean clustering are very much aligned towards the lithofacies identification, which works good for stratigraphic plays. And optimum number of cluster selection is also important. See, we have used different number of clusters: 4x4, 8x8, 16x16, 64x64. So the small number, that is 4x4, those are not able to give the every detail of it. But at the same time, 64x64, those clusters are very high in number, also identifying small features which are not our interest. So selecting the optimal cluster units are also important. For our case, 8x8 works very well. So this is our study which we have done for the discontinuity identification. Thank you very much. At the end, I would like to thank IEW for providing me this opportunity. And I would also like to thank my employer, IOCL, and my team for providing me this opportunity to present my work over here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ayush. So for the next talk, I would like to invite Kallol Saha. Kallol is Director of and Head of International Transactions Research in S&P Global. And he's going to talk about international collaborations in hydrocarbon insights from the ADNOC and Aramco, and how it can be applicable to the Indian NOCs. And Kallol is going to touch upon the strategic financial partnerships in that space. Kallol holds almost close to 2 decades of experience in M&A, in strategy portfolio assessments, and obviously in deep financial analysis. So over to you, Kallol.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Bishish sir, for the introduction, and good afternoon to my fellow panelists. Today, my session is not that technical. So it is more about collaboration in international oil and gas sector. I'll try to bring a story from the Middle Eastern national oil companies and what is the learning for us from their activities. India is at a point of inflection where I would say that there is an expected demand growth for both oil and gas. Our domestic production is not increasing at the rate that we expect. At the same time, we have not been investing outside our home country aggressively. I would say our investment outside India is quite low in the last 4-5 years. Now, at the same time, we are seeing companies like Aramco and ADNOC, who are the resource owners, and they are the net exporters of oil at least. So, but at the same time, these companies are quite aggressively investing outside their home country. So that's the interesting story we are seeing in the energy sector. And I would like to explain that and show some of the key insights from their activities. Both ADNOC and Aramco, in the last 2 years, they have built a repeatable growth model. What they did, they have monetized some of their midstream assets. They have retained the operational control. They have raised money through equity participation from some of their entities and partnered with international financial institutions. And through this process, they have raised significant volume of, I think, dollar number, which I'll show later. But I have two charts here. The chart on the left, you can see the participation from Middle Eastern national oil companies in monetization or divestment. In the year 2020 and 21, their share was about 16% and 27% in all the midstream transactions happened worldwide. The numbers are still high. You can see in year 2025, it is about 22%. So both ADNOC and Aramco, they have been quite active in divesting their midstream assets in the market. So they are the key sellers in the market. Now the chart on the right, here I have shown the investment or acquisitions from Middle Eastern national oil companies. What is interesting, you can see from 2022 onwards, there is an increasing share for national oil companies. If I talk about national oil companies worldwide, because of slowdown of activity from Chinese national oil companies, there is a declining M&A activity from national oil companies as a whole. But in that group, there is a new buyer in the market, which is the national oil, which are primarily ADNOC and Aramco, and they have been buying assets outside their home countries. Even last year, ADNOC submitted a bid for the acquisition of Australian oil and gas companies, Santos, and that volume price was about 19 billion. And if that was a failed transaction, they have it has not gone through. But I have just shown the figure here. If it would have happened, these NOCs would have captured 100% of national oil companies' upstream M&A activity internationally. And this transaction only constitute about 16% of overall worldwide M&A transactions in upstream sector. So that's the kind of impact, that's the kind of participation we are seeing from Middle Eastern national oil companies. So what are the key drivers and how much amount they have raised through all these activities? So for them, raising money is very important. You have seen, we can see the two figures, one from ADNOC, their activities since 2019. For Aramco, their activities from 2021. So they have raised about 26 billion and 13 billion from these divestment of their stakes in their midstream assets. Through equity financing, they have raised about 44 billion. So that's the volume they have raised in the last 5-6 years. And for through all these divestments in their home countries, financial or institutions or key infrastructure financing companies, they have partnered. Name it either BlackRock, KKR or EIG. These companies has invested in those projects because of that steady revenue stream and minimum commitment of oil and gas volume through those pipelines. So that's the basic drivers for those new investors. So this is only a map for all these investments from these national oil companies. I would say from ADNOC and Saudi Aramco. But what is important, they are expanding everywhere. You can see the map. They are there in North America. They are in South America. They are in CIS countries, Africa. Even they have tried to expand in Australasia region as well. So they are everywhere. They are expanding. I'll talk about that in detail. So I'll first talk about Aramco. It's a busy slide, so I'll explain that. Aramco, they have invested in Mid-Ocean Energy. It's an LNG company formed by EIG, another private equity firm. Currently, it holds 49% stake in the company, and through that, they have expanded in various continents like Australia, Peru, and most recently in Canada. And the goal is very clear for ADNOC. They wanted to build a portfolio global LNG footprint of 20 million metric ton per annum, and that is going to complement their oil portfolio as well as their downstream strength. So that's the journey for Saudi Aramco. Now, I'll talk about ADNOC. Again, a bit busy slide, but this is a timeline for ADNOC of their investment since 2023. First, they have attempted to acquire 50% stake in a company called NewMed, which is Israel-based. They are one of the key producers in Israel. They partnered with BP and invested there, but due to Israel-Palestine conflict started, they have withdrawn from this acquisition. But after that, it's a quite aggressive investment from ADNOC. You can see the some of the transactions in Azerbaijan. They have acquired in Mozambique. That's again an LNG project. They have formed a JV with BP and currently investing in Egypt. The new recent investment, as I mentioned earlier, that it's Santos they tried to acquire, which they could not. But recently, they have entered again in another LNG project, which is in Argentina. Through all these transactions, the company is well placed to achieve its target. You can see the target number. It's about 20 to 25 million metric ton by 2035. Now, this is an interesting chart. The first one is ADNOC position or current position in LNG space. It ranked 26th with its current capacity, which is about 4.4 million metric ton. Now, if they could have achieved the acquisition of, successfully completed that acquisition of Santos, they could have achieved a rank of 12 with that acquisition in the year 2025 or 26 itself. Since it failed to close that transaction, now they have a long path to go, and one of their recent entry is definitely another upcoming LNG project, which is another, I would say, 12 million metric ton project in Argentina. Now, if they achieve their 20 to 25 million metric ton goal by the year 2025, their ranking will be So that means by year 2035, ADNOC will be the top, one of the players in top 10 LNG producers worldwide. So that's the ultimate target for ADNOC, and hopefully they can achieve that. Now, what is there for Indian companies? So in India, we have vast midstream, whole strong resource base in midstream sector, including LNG regasification projects. What is important for us, we have to see that whether we can identify some of those midstream projects for monetization, whether we can attract some of these international investments players which are more interested in stable earnings. They do not like the volatility in upstream sector. So that's the monetization possibility. We are not saying here that we need to imitate that, but that definitely will widen the options India have in global energy sector, and that will also provide new opportunities to our national oil companies so that they can access new opportunities internationally through these partnerships. They can also improve the diversity of their portfolio, and finally, they can also secure the long-term supply of oil, both oil and gas. So what are the key takeaways? One, monetization, and ADNOC and Aramco, they offer a great reference point for us. One is monetize smartly, partner deeply, and expand with discipline. So India as a country with vast resources, at least with the current data, mostly in midstream sector, that includes LNG and pipelines. India can adopt the strategy that is aligned to their strategies and can build a more stronger and balanced international portfolio in oil and gas sector. Thank you so much for listening. Any questions you have, we can take it later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kallol, for citing the Middle Eastern examples of how companies can expand and what strategies could be adopted in terms of monetization, and even how do we finance and refinance for growth, and how India and especially the Indian NOCs can take those learnings from there. Going back to subsurface again, and going back to our geoscientific and subsurface data sets, I now call upon Nicolás Celesia from Interfaces SA, who is a geologist, and he's going to talk on new paradigms of formation characterizations and reservoir study. And Nicolás holds over 17 years of experience in developing specialized softwares and solutions for the oil and gas industry, especially focusing on innovative tools to enhance reservoir characterizations. Over to Nicolás.
Hi, my name is Nicolás. I work at Interfaces. We are a software company. We develop a software called Sahara. And well, hopefully if you were paying attention a couple of presentations before, you'll be able to use some of the knowledge imparted us on supervised, unsupervised learning, neural networks, and all that. So one thing that's become apparent in the last years is that we have new tools on our belt. We have very powerful tools that will allow us to do a lot of things, but are also quite sometimes complicated to use or needed a specialist. So it's been our focus to find particular workflows where these tools specifically apply and develop a software that will allow you to implement those solutions in all your fields in a consistent way without the need of having your genius in each of those fields, in each of those assets. So today I'm going to be showing one of those workflows we implemented in Sahara. It's our software in our data analytics module that's called Aleph. And this one will be centered on formation characterization and reservoir quality. So traditionally, we had an approach where us, the geologist, will visually look at several logs, our SP logs, our density logs, our resistivity logs, and we will visually detect patterns in them and correlate and detect the reservoir where we wanted to perforate or do something like that. Now, those kind of workflows where we are pattern matching or stuff like that are the bread and butter of algorithms and artificial intelligence or multivariate statistics or whatever you want to call them now, right? So our proposed method is to find an agnostic workflow where we would feed the unsupervised learning algorithms with just data. So we will only be using measured logs, right? SP, density, resistivity, might be missing another one, and gamma ray, but no interpretation here at all. And then with those, we'll get an agnostic, independent interpretation of the rock quality that we have in our wells. And then once we get to that point is where the expert can come in and interpret those and provide its knowledge with those results. So, and the key value from this is, of course, that this will drastically reduce our interpretation time and let us, as specialists, focus on the actual fun part, right? The actual meaningful part. We'll have 2 steps here. We'll first have to do all the data mining and the boring part of all these algorithms that we always have. Like, we have to standardize the data set, we have to clean it up, and we have to get it ready for the machine to be able to make its calculations and run its algorithms and provide us with good results. So we'll be using all the measured logs, as I said, and then we have some supervised machine learning techniques to complete any data set that might be missing. So if we need to synthesize a log, that's another workflow that I'm not going to talk about today, but we've also had case studies on that workflow and great results, and will allow you to save a lot of money, for example, measuring less logs than you usually did, because you'll find which ones are better to synthesize and obtain based on the other ones. So our first step was to set this data up, the database. So using this integration between our data analytics model and Sahara, we can aerially visualize the distribution of the logs that we have measured. Sometimes these wells, in particular in this case study that I'm presenting, were drilled decades apart with different tools, different companies. So you need to standardize that, fix the units, make sure to remove any inconsistent or non-valid values. And all those cleanups can be automatized and are part of our tool. So that shortens this time that is usually the most tedious part and the boring part that nobody talks about, right? Before doing all the fancy stuff that we do with machine learning and algorithms. But this is standardized and made much faster by using these tools that we incorporate. So once we have that clean database of logs that we can feed the algorithms, we start by running 2 different algorithms in this particular workflow. That is cluster analysis and then a self-organizing map, a neural network, right? So with this, we can find in the first chart there you see the breakpoint, so the best point or the best number of groups that will ask the algorithm to sort our data into. That reduces that variation, right? So the most significant groups. And with that, we find, in this study in particular, we found that 3 groups was the best number. We could have run 4, and this is important to know. There's no wrong answer. But typically, if you go too far, you end up having meaningless groups or groups that you're not able to characterize. And if you go too low, you might find groups meshed together that you really wanted to identify, right? So the point of this is that our algorithms will sort our data into 3 groups. That's what we are asking. And then it's up to us to provide meaning to those 3 groups, right? So you can see in the second plot, we have the 3 groups, and that histogram is the amount of registers, so the depth intervals that were set into each of those groups. And then we also have some distribution in depth of those groups, because you also want the groups to have some geological sense, right? So if you look at those groups in depth and they just don't make sense, you might have to go back and analyze the algorithm. So all that part of the workflow is what we've done in these case studies to be able to provide a software that has that tool built in and you don't have to go through all that knowledge acquirement process, right? So we have our 3 groups that we found, and those are the interesting ones. Now it's where the expert chimes in, right? You have 3 groups, but the algorithm has no knowledge of what this is about. Since we know the data we fed is all related to rock, and we have measurements of the subsurface rock that we have, we can know, or our thesis was, okay, this will relate to rock quality and reservoir quality, right? So now that we have our groups, we can start analyzing them using these box plots and other statistical charts to try to find out what those groups are, right? So we can see the first one here is the density log box plot. The second one is SP, and the third one is resistivity. So from there, we can find out that groups 1 and 3 have the higher resistivities, the lower densities, and the biggest inflections of SP. So those are likely to be our target reservoirs, right? In particular, group 3 looks like the best quality reservoir, while group 1 is also worth analyzing, right? So these and a lot more plots are the tools that you will be able to work with to characterize those reservoirs and then focus on them. So another important part of this workflow that we did, and you would be spared that work, but is we ran 2 algorithms, right? We ran a clustering algorithm and the neural networks. And an important validation that we need to do to make sure that this study is consistent and is useful is to run these hundreds of times and make sure the groups are consistent throughout all those runs. And then also this is a confusion matrix that is named, where we have in one axis one of the algorithms and the other axis has the other algorithm. And we want to make sure that we have a correlation between those so that they are seeing the same groups, right? It's not that one algorithm sorts the data into one kind of groups and the other one does a separate thing. So having that correlation, so those close to yellow colors, it could be diagonal or anything, but we can see the group 1 correlates highly with the group 1 of the other algorithm, and the same for 2 and 3, right? So then the numbers don't mind, but having a strong correlation there is what allows us to say, okay, we can trust these algorithms and our workflow, and we have identified correctly 3 distinct groups. So the next step, once we had these groups, was to go back to our project in Sahara, and then we wanted to plot what these groups look like right next to our logs and to our historical perforations that were done in that field. So that's what we're looking at in that figure, and you can see the long green bars are the actual perforations that were performed in that field, while there you have 1, 2, and 3, the values for our groups. And then we can also validate with our historical data how groups 1 and 3 almost perfectly correlate to our existing perforations. So the results that we obtained using this method are consistent with what the geologists have done in the past decades, while of course saving a lot of time and allowing them to focus on the interpretation part and the bond. So this also lets you do one thing extra, that is to find missed opportunities. Because right now we're applying the same agnostic, as we like to call it, analysis to all your field and all your fields of your company, right? So you don't depend now on if one geologist was more likely to interpret one thing, or he liked better when the deflections look a particular way. Now you have a consistent method and fast that will let you track all that and then detect what if your group 1, or you might find that your group 1 are all the obvious targets, right? They are the highest quality reservoirs and you've already perforated those. And you might be more interested in or group 3 was the best one here. You might be interested in your group 1, that is your pending oil or others. Or you can use this to prioritize workovers as well. So if you have some budget for workovers, with this kind of analysis, you can look at the remaining oil behind each of those perforations and what is the quality of that rock. Okay, and then some other things that you can do with this. Let me see. Okay. So another thing that we did with this was map them areally, right? So that will also allow you to verify the consistency of your results and watch out in a map by interpolating those values into their areas and seeing where your highest quality reservoir lies. And this workflow is also extended in other ways. For example, for unconventional resources, if we added to our data set the geomechanical logs, we were able to track rock properties there and allow you to better design your trajectory for your wells or plan your fractures more accordingly. So as I said, these tools are very flexible and have a lot of potential. So what we are doing is having verified work cases and then presenting those as a built-in tool for our software, so you don't have to go through all the Python scripting and all the extra things that require very specific knowledge and might be difficult to extrapolate to your whole company. We've had already like 4 or 5 of these workflows, and more will be coming as we prove them, because since we want to make a standard tool, we want to make sure this is working. So this study case is in Argentina, where we did, and we have others in Colombia as well. Some of our conclusions and takeaways. So this is very efficient. This is something that once you tidy your database, which we have built several tools to make faster, you can run this very fast in minutes and then focus on the results and how to use them. This will provide a criteria to rank workovers. We also built some tool that will detect depth intervals that belong to a particular quality of rock or that succeed some cutoffs and were not perforated still. So integrating all this information into a software will let you, with one click, find a result of all your depth intervals that have the most potential and let you focus your analysis and time on those. And well, as I said, we have proven this already in several study cases. So we'd like to offer this as a tool for all of you to have. Okay. Thank you for your time, and that's all.
Thank you, Nicolás. As you saw, the challenges which we started off with in monetization of, thank you very much for a patient hearing, and thank you panel speakers for giving a wonderful presentation.